Zocco's Modern Life. Zocco's Modern Life.
And welcome back to the Zocco's Modern Life podcast. That lovely theme music is back, and it always means we're here talking some sports. I'm Joey Zocco, and I'm joined by two of my good friends from Quinnipiac that we always seem to, whenever we get together, we talk basketball. Whether we get together for a different reason, we always get brought back to basketball, mainly because of me, and that's what I like to talk about. But I'm joined by Jordan Katz and Ricky Funaro. We got a three-person pod. How's it going, guys?
Joey, how you doing, man?
Good. Ricky, what's up?
You know what? I am good, and you know that little intro you got there. I think I'm gonna make it my ringtone.
Yeah. See, so like when we record the pod, we don't actually play the theme music. We're not that sophisticated. So,
but you know what? It's so good. I remember it, and I'm thinking I'm gonna redo the song and sing it myself and make it my own ringtone.
Yeah, whoever was singing that did a pretty good job. So coming up on this one, the NBA season is less than a week away. We're going to talk, hopefully try to get to some stuff more than just team previews. I mean, you can kind of get that anywhere. So maybe go over our playoff teams, give you some like award predictions, like Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, Most Improved, kind of go over everything. And hopefully that guides our conversation into some other stuff that people may not normally talk about. So let's start with Jordan. Anything that you wanted to kind of touch on that you kind of wanted to talk about before we kind of go into some other stuff?
I think the two most interesting teams this year are actually from the East, and I actually think they're from the same division. I think the Chicago Bulls are incredibly intriguing. Fred Hoiberg, if anybody watched college basketball, Fred Hoiberg is a basketball guru and a very good head coach, and I think he'll do a great job with the offense. And it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if the defense for the Bulls suffers at all, because as a whole, their individual defenders are actually a little overrated. So it's going to be very interesting to watch them throughout the year. And I think probably for me, the most intriguing team, I don't know about you, Rick, but the most intriguing team for me is the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks have depth. The Bucks have youth that looks to be on the cusp of stardom, particularly Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think this is an incredibly intriguing team that Jason Kidd's got, and I'm very interested to see what they do this year.
Jordan, I couldn't agree with you more. We'll get to where we have the teams in the conference, but I'll give you this right now. I have Milwaukee finishing third in the Eastern Conference. I'm buying that much to what the Milwaukee Bucks are doing this year. They almost beat Chicago, I believe it was in the first round of the playoffs last year. This team, they pretty much have a little bit of everything. They want guard play, they have guard play. They signed Greg Monroe from the Pistons last year. He locked down the center. John Henson just blocked shots. They're getting Jabari Parker back, who went down with towards ACL last year, and he might be the best player on this team. And they have a lot of great young players on this team. So I'm with you. I'm really excited to see the Milwaukee Bucks this year. I think they're going to be a great young team to watch.
I think that point about Jabari Parker is absolutely spot on, because I think people forget, Joey, that Jabari Parker was supposed to be the piece last year that put this team in that 4, 5, 6 area and really competed to at least make the conference final, or, in the Eastern Conference case, the team that eventually loses to the Katz. I think that the Bucks are so interesting because not only do they have youth, and they added Monroe, like Ricky said, but they also have just a ton of depth, and Jason Kidd does very well when he can rotate guys in and out and not miss a beat and continue to play his style.
Yeah, so I am still here. I'm just drinking my coffee on this lovely Friday morning, talking basketball. I am having a great time. But about the Bucks, so I actually did research on every team. I thought we were doing an NBA preview, like I've been telling you guys, of like every team, go in depth, do video, the whole thing, and that fell apart for now. But so they added Greg Monroe and Grievous Vasquez from Toronto, I believe, who's another. So we talk about guard play. If Carter Williams is struggling one game, Grievous Vasquez is a legitimate another big guy for his position, point guard that can knock down big shots. They lost Ersan Ilyasova to Detroit. It was kind of a trade, but it wasn't for Monroe. Zaza Pachulia, Jared Dudley, I think, is going to be a huge loss for them. And they drafted Rashad Vaughn, who, again, with this team, you can't say it enough, that Rashad Vaughn is 6'7", shooting guard, big, thick kid like Jabari Parker, can really shoot it. I thought was one of the sleepers in the first round. Kind of fell to Milwaukee, I think, at 16, 17, 18. And I really like Rashad Vaughn eventually getting minutes in this offense when they need some shooting. So it was a great pick for them. But I agree, this team is so hard to predict where they're going to finish in an Eastern Conference where you don't know if Miami's going to stay healthy, you don't know if Chicago's going to stay healthy, and how those teams fare. Atlanta is different. So there's a lot of range in the East for the Bucks to move up. I just wanted to, this made me think of, you guys mentioned Greg Monroe. One of the superlatives I came up with was, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, this is great planning. All right, player most likely to regret where he signed this summer. And I really had some trouble thinking, besides any Laker or Knick, once they realized that they're not going to win crap this year. But besides like anybody on those teams, Greg Monroe might be one of those players. Like the Bucks really play a lot of free basketball, positionless basketball, and they don't really, at least last year, they didn't post a lot of guys up. So Greg Monroe is really good with his back to the basket, can't really hit consistently a jumper. Maybe he's worked on that, but hasn't been known for his jump shot. So the fit on paper, it looks great. They got a big guy that they can play with their shooters, and he's going to rebound. He's not a rim protector. So that kind of also limits, I think, on the defensive end for the Bucks. But I think Greg Monroe can be one of the players that maybe regrets where he signed or isn't as good of a fit as we think. If either of you guys kind of want to jump on that or give another player that you think might regret where he signed this summer.
The interesting point about Monroe is that, good coaches will coach to their personnel. And Jason Kidd definitely did that last year, playing the free-flowing offense like you mentioned. This year, I think Jason Kidd's going to do two things with Monroe. I think he's going to use him in pick-and-roll action, and I think he's going to use him as a weak side post-up option. I think they're going to keep the strong side of the offense free-flowing. Pass and move, pass and cut, and Greg Monroe can do that very well. That was an offense that he actually executed in Georgetown. When the shot clock was winding down, that's when Georgetown would go to the post-up option and just dump the ball into their NBA player and say, go to work. I think that they're going to keep the offensive mentality of pass and cut, pass and move. And I think Monroe can fit into that. But I think the point of Monroe having to find his way in the offense and having it take some time is absolutely valid.
Yeah, well, in terms of who I think is a free agent that I think is going to regret where they go, that's going to be a little bit of a surprise considering all the drama. But I'm going to go with DeAndre Jordan. There was a part of him who obviously wanted to leave Los Angeles, and he wouldn't have agreed with Dallas if that feeling wasn't there. Then he had the feeling, oh, you know what? I think I should go back. I'm making a mistake. The Clippers locked him up in his own house and wouldn't let anybody in, let anybody out. Just a bizarre thing. But I think ultimately, I think maybe not this year, but maybe in a couple of years, I think we might see him start to regret it just a little bit. For whatever reason, I think that he thinks that he's going to get a bigger part of this offense. And if he doesn't improve on that, they're not going to go to him. They have plenty of options on offense this year and in a couple of years to go to. Griffin's going to get a lot of touches, obviously. Chris Paul's going to get a lot of touches. And I think he's going to want a bigger part of the offensive part of the basketball. But unless he finds some kind of improvement and it's just not a guy who's around the rim, I just don't see him being a part of that. So I can see him getting upset over that.
Yeah, Jordan, before you get in on this, so, Ricky, you're saying Doc Rivers might have lied to him to get him back?
I'm saying that to get him back, you're going to say, okay, DeAndre, you want to come back, we'll make you a bigger part of the offense. But when it comes down to it, do you really think they're going to hand more of the ball to him on the offensive end? And, when Chris Paul starts, I mean, he's getting on the wrong side of 30 now. when Chris Paul starts to decline, and they're going to give it to DeAndre Jordan with the way he shoots the basketball outside the rim. I don't know. I just don't see. I think you might start to see him be a little unhappy. I'm not saying this year, but maybe in like a year or two.
Personally, I think that to answer this superlative question, I'm actually going to take someone who opted into a deal, which is, I guess, cheating a little bit. But I think the player that's going to regret their move the most is actually Luol Deng. And regret is a strong word because I love Miami this year, and I think Deng is a key piece. But I think he's going to regret it in terms of his next contract, because I actually think that towards the end of this season, the Heat are going to opt to start Justice Winslow for defensive purposes and bring Deng off the bench, because you have Winslow who's got a little more length and can run the floor a little better and probably fits in to what Goran Dragic's tempo dictates, whereas Deng can come off the bench and be much more productive in a 20 to 25-minute role. So I think in terms of his next deal, Luol Deng might regret opting into his deal rather than opting out.
I love the Miami Heat as well, and I just want to say one thing about Doc Rivers. He had no choice but to lie, and as I said when it happened, Doc Rivers lost DeAndre Jordan and was beat. That Clippers team, they would not have brought in they have a really great bench too, so in crunch time, DeAndre might not even be on the floor now. So a bigger part of the offense.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't think Doc lied. I think Doc is entirely set on DeAndre Jordan being a more involved role in this offense. I think that the game plan is going to be that we're going to actually use DeAndre in the post a little more, and we're going to have him try to develop a post game. And I think the reason why they want to do that is they want to make him a better shooter. Whether you make him a better shooter with a 6-foot hook or get him some touch in some way, shape, or form, it's going to make him better at the line. And that's where they become a better team, especially down the stretch, because they don't have to pull DeAndre Jordan out of games. I think the intention is completely to make DeAndre more involved on the offensive side. I just don't think it's going to work. And that's why I think that, in a sense, you guys are right in the sense that he lied. Because midway through the year, they're just going to turn around and go, okay, you clearly just can't shoot. We're going to go back to our old offense.
Right. Yeah, Rick, if you want to jump in on that, or the Miami Heat, but I'll just my point is, yeah, I mean, we're saying he lied in a funny. Of course, he has good intentions, and Doc Rivers is a good coach. But if he doesn't get DeAndre Jordan back, the Clippers are on the edge of the playoffs this year, and they don't bring in all those free agents. So he needed DeAndre Jordan and kind of needed to say whatever he needed to say to get him. And I believe he'll give it a fair chance. But right, I also think it won't work the way it could in theory.
And can we also, just for the sake of this superlative here, also just give a shout out to Rajon Rondo? I mean, this. I mean, this is just going to see. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious that Rajon Rondo, all sides involved, the Kings, DeMarcus Cousins, Rondo, it's just a witch's pot for the sake of a Halloween reference. Just everything is just going to bubble over here. I mean, you could just see it. Rondo taking too many shots when Cousins thinks he should take the shot. Rondo, getting the big head, defying the. I mean, this is just going to be insanity. I mean, we can all agree on that, I think.
I'm really upset we're never going to get to see a big three of Cousins, Rondo, and Carmelo Anthony just for laughing purposes.
And you know what? Yeah, just for sake, let's have Isaiah Thomas as the head coach.
Absolutely. Let's do it. I'm all for anarchy.
Oh, my God. What? Well, now, I don't think any of us are Knicks fans would. The Jordan actually might be. Want that? Okay, would you want that mess on the Knicks?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I'm just saying.
Right, okay.
Hilarious.
So I think, Rondo, we should talk about the Kings. We kind of blew over the Heat quick. When we get to the playoffs, obviously, we're going to talk about them as, at least for me, a serious contender. So we'll get back to Miami. But for the Kings, I don't even know where to begin. Let me see here. I'll start with this since we're talking about the Kings, and no one knows what they did this summer. So they added Rajon Rondo, as we talked about. They added Marco Bellinelli. They added Costa Koufis and Caron Butler. And they lost Ray McCallum, Carl Landry, Stauskas, which, again, that trade, it's crazy that they gave up a first-round pick with Stauskas to clear cap space for a player they didn't have yet. Jason Thompson, Reggie Evans, Andre Miller, blah, blah, blah. And they drafted Willie Cauley-Stein. So they must have plans of playing Boogie at power forward in a league where teams are trying to go small. So you would think Rudy Gay would see more minutes at power forward. Rudy Gay is still very good. I think this can work, and I have them on the edge of the playoffs if this thing doesn't self-implode first.
Rudy Gay looked really bad at power forward at many stretches of last season. He looked good offensively, but he couldn't guard anybody defensively, and that's sort of the reason I think why they went away from going small. I like their decision to go big. I think if you look at the best teams in the NBA, the Bulls, the Clippers, the Spurs now, I think they're big. I think what they are is they're big and they're smart. And, of course, the Kings miss the intelligence factor on this team. I think the Kings' key going forward is going to be the development, actually, of Seth Curry, because I don't think Rajon Rondo or Darren Collison is a long-term answer at point guard. And if Seth Curry doesn't develop this season, then you know what your goal is in the draft. You're drafting a guard, and you're drafting a lead guard, and you want him to lead the offense. I think this is a transition year for the Kings where they can actually compete. And those are the best years to have when you're a young franchise. When you're in the middle of a transition and you have a roster that, if it clicks, can really compete, you're set up very nicely. I think the other team that actually is very much like that is the Knicks. I think the Knicks are in transition. The Knicks are going to be fun to watch this year. They're going to win 33 games-ish, but they're going to be fun to watch because they're going to be competitive. The Knicks have a solid front line. The Knicks have two rookies, one of which I actually think could win Rookie of the Year. We'll get to that later. And I think that they're going to be very competitive in terms of just being in ball games. I think the Kings, Rick, they can be a team like that. They can be one of those 35-win teams that is more competitive than their record shows.
You know what? I got to agree with you. As much as I do think that at some point this year, the emotions are definitely going to boil over at some point, I do think that they will be able to keep it together just enough to be competitive. And they're going to be a team, like you said, while they may not make the playoffs, they might be a team that you don't want to face going down the stretch if you're a team that is trying to make a playoff push. Especially if you have guys like Rondo and Cousins clicking. And I think, despite him not being a factor offensively, I love the fact that they drafted Willie Cauley-Stein. I love his defense. I loved watching him on Kentucky. He can block a shot in the paint. He can go on the perimeter and block a shot. I love his defense. And I think if they can bring him along offensively a little bit, right now he's very raw, but if they can bring him along offensively just a little bit over the next couple of years, and you have DeMarcus, unless he demands a trade, DeMarcus and Willie Cauley-Stein in your front court for the next several years, I think I'll buy into the Kings a little more. I can see the Kings making a little bit of a push here.
I think you got the other. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, no, just quickly, and the Kings are going to be a great team to watch. I'm getting League Pass, and I will always check in on the Kings game because there's a chance for a great alley-oop, right? But then there's also a chance for, DeMarcus Cousins standing there when his guy cuts to the basket for an alley-oop, and Rondo then yelling at him while the other team goes down to score. And, this is going to be so much tall. And then George Karl's on the bench, not even moving. It's going to be great.
What's the over-under on the amount of times that happens this year?
Oh, God, it's for the 15.
At least. That would be one a week?
On a serious note, though, I do think that Rajon Rondo Rajon Rondo has absolutely no more leverage. He has to either shut his mouth and play, or he's not getting another deal, and he'll ride the bench until this deal runs out. Because the Kings do have 2 point guards to replace him. They have Darren Collison, and as much as I'm not so sure that Seth Curry is anything, Seth Curry had a very nice summer, and maybe they give him a look, and maybe he develops into something. I think the Kings, for the record, by the way, I still don't have the Kings winning more than 30 games. But I think that the Kings can compete with other teams on a nightly basis, just like I think the Knicks and the Magic will compete with teams on a nightly basis. And I think that's a step in the right direction for those 3 teams.
Yep. I definitely want to go east, and we can maybe even get to the playoff thing about how much we think the Magic and the Knicks are going to compete. But the Kings, you talked about them potentially needing a lead guard. Well, this is why it's such a mess. They had a chance to get Moutier this year, and they took Cauley-Stein, and that's fine. So, big men are at a premium, and I think Cauley-Stein is going to be in this league for a long time because of his versatility. So I don't, that pick is what it is. But to go Ben McLemore and Nick Stauskas in back-to-back drafts, 2013, 2014, this team back. Like, imagine, obviously Stauskas isn't on the team anymore, but instead of taking Stauskas, there were point guards available. And Elfrid Payton, I believe, went after Stauskas. Marcus Smart went earlier. You could have tried to move up instead of giving all your picks to Philadelphia. There were other ways to get or take a shot at getting a lead guard, and then maybe Rondo's not in the mix, and you kind of have a little more stability. But
last point before we switch topics, their lead guard is coming. If they wind up in the top 3 in the next draft, Melo Trimble is coming. They can go get their lead guard. Melo Trimble is, in my opinion, the best player in the country in college basketball, and I think he might lead Maryland to a Final Four appearance. This kid is the real deal.
We can let's go. So you brought up the Magic and the Knicks and all that. Let's just jump right into I think we're about halfway, so let's do our playoff teams in the East then, and we can kind of go over that. How do you guys want to do this? Do you want to just so I don't think we should seed them. Let's just say who we have getting in. So, I think we can all agree the Cavs, the Heat, the Bulls, the Bucks, are in, right? That's 4?
I have those 4.
Okay.
I have those 4.
Okay. And then I think the rest of them are kind of iffy. So and that includes Atlanta, which I can't believe I'm saying it, but that's my team that, I don't know. So Ricky, if you want to go first, we all have those 4, the Cavs, the Heat, the Bulls, the Bucks. If you kind of want to go over your other 4 or teams on the edge, whatever you want to do.
Well, I think a team that is going to get into the playoffs this year, and I'll just say it, I have them as my 7th seed right now, is Indiana. I was kind of on the edge of having them. I was going to have Miami 7 and Indiana 8, instead I flip-flopped it with Indiana 7. And the reason for me personally is because of my comeback player of the year, Paul George. I love the way Paul George plays the game. He's obviously a threat offensively. He can play defense. The Pacers roster is probably isn't the deepest in the league, especially in the front court. You got Ian Mahinmi as your starting center, who isn't bad, but you really don't want him as your starting center after they traded Roy Hibbert this year. But I like the way George Hill was your point guard this year. He was, I would say, a net plus as your point guard. They signed Monte Ellis, Stuckey as his backup. I think that the Pacers, they are probably just one big front court guy away from being another elite team again. They could probably use a couple more wing players, but I say one more front court guy where you can move Paul George from the power forward spot back to small forward. And I think the Pacers can make a run this year.
I have the Pacers as a playoff team too, real quick. I think that Lavoy Allen is actually going to wind up being the starting center rather than Ian Mahinmi because Lavoy Allen fits better with the offensive mindset that is the Indiana Pacers right now. With Paul George playing the 4, you're going to have to push the tempo a little bit. You have to play a little faster, and I think LaVoy Allen is better served as an offensive center. But I think Monte Ellis is the X factor for this team. Adding Monte Ellis and taking immediate pressure off Paul George from night one is going to do wonders for this offense. Ellis can break a defense down. You know he's not afraid to shoot. And Ellis is actually, I think, a better passer and a more willing passer than he gets credit for because of how many shots he takes. So I think Monte Ellis absolutely will have this team back in the postseason, along with the return of Paul George.
Yep, totally agree. And I'll get us to another team in a second. The Pacers added Miles Turner, who I really like in the draft. Kind of a versatile center, kind of shoot, big enough body to kind of protect the rim. I like him. And they also got Joseph Young out of Oregon, who they say is going to play backup point guard, and they really like him as well. So they have both of those guys. The front court's a little iffy, but I think if they get really up and down, they'll be okay. So the Pacers, I agree. It all hinges on Paul George, but I think they get in. I really like the Magic, but I still can't see them getting in because then that means like the Hawks, Wizards, Raptors,
I think
Celtics
the Magic
are kind of not in.
I think the Magic compete. I just think that they'll wind up with, 30 wins and be a nice competitive team. Again, I feel the same way about the Knicks. In a large portion, I actually feel the same way about the Bobcats. A lot of people have the Bobcats as a sleeper team to make the postseason in the East because of the addition of Nick Batum and how this team defensively could be arguably the best defensive team in the league individually. Maybe they're not as a team, but in individual defensive spots, they're terrific. And you have a big-time center in Al Jefferson. How many teams have a big-time center and don't wind up going places when you've got the talent? My problem with the Bobcats is very simple. I don't see any consistent scoring on this team besides Al Jefferson. Kemba has off nights. Nick Batum goes through stretches in the season where he's nowhere to be found, and there is nobody on this team that I think is a real threat to extend the arc. So I don't know what everybody sees in Charlotte, but I think they're also in that mix of teams that compete but don't quite get to where they want to go. I think the team that we haven't mentioned yet, we've mentioned them briefly. I think you did, Joe. I think Atlanta is easily back in the postseason. I don't even think it's a debate. I still think they're one of the best teams in the conference. I don't think DeMar Carroll is actually going to wind up mattering that much, that loss, because you can bring Sabo off the bench and play the same amount of defense that he played. Their key is actually going to be the Hardaway deal, because if Tim Hardaway can provide the offensive punch that was lost with Carroll, which I think he can, maybe not consistently, but I think he can do it, I think this team is just fine.
Yeah, Rick, anything on that, bud?
In terms, going back to the Magic, I was doing some research last night, and I found out that the Orlando Magic were tied for 6th in defensive rating in the league last year. And at first thought, I'm like, wait, what? And then I realized, as your center, Nikola Vucevic is one of the most underrated centers in the league. I mean, people, they have the same centers in their mind of, Dwight Howard, Jefferson, DeAndre Jordan down the line of the best centers. But this guy continually produces year after year. I mean, I think what he averaged, 18, 19 points a game last year. I mean, a double-double. You see when he gets hurt how much they miss him.
19 and 11, by the way, for Vucevic.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? It keeps trending up year after year. Now, if Aaron Gordon in his second year can make a few strides, I can see the Magic, with the defense that they have and the strides coming offensively, I could see the Magic being a team to watch next year. This year,
you're absolutely right. They've got a ton of young talent, and I think Mario Hezonja is going to add a big-time offensive punch off the bench to a team that you mentioned already plays great defense, especially in the backcourt. I don't think Elfrid Payton gets enough credit for how good of a defender he is.
No, yeah.
Talk about Depot all the time. But Elfrid Payton's a terrific defender. They can play individual defense with the best of them. I think Aaron Gordon is absolutely the X factor for this team. If he winds up becoming a solid NBA power forward, you're right on the money, Rick. Watch out next year, because next year this team could be big time.
Yeah, and so I agree the Magic are like a year away, and Aaron Gordon, this is the one thing about like Summer League and preseason that kind of does carry over. Like Aaron Gordon just physically shot the ball really well in Summer League, and I didn't really watch many preseason, but he was able to make shots is what I'm getting at, and that's something he wasn't able to do last year. So he clearly improved on it, and if that continues, that's a huge part of his game that will make him even more dangerous. Just the ability to make shots. I don't care where it is, Summer League, preseason, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
physically, yeah.
Let's round out our playoff teams in the East real quick, and then we'll move on over to the West. Just for the record, just to have them lined up, I have, in my personal opinion, I have Chicago 1 because I think that they're going to push for that number 1 seed. I think there's always a team that we saw Atlanta do it last year. I think Chicago will be the team to do it this year. Cleveland's my 2, Atlanta's my 3. Toronto wins the Atlantic by default. I think that they actually have taken a step backward, which is so interesting to think about when you add DeMar Carroll. But I think by way of a lot of teams in the East getting better and Toronto making a neutral move with DeMar Carroll replacing Terrence Ross, I'm not a huge fan of DeMar Carroll. I know he plays good individual defense, but I think a lot of it was a product of how good Atlanta is. So they're the 4 by default for me. I have Miami as my 5. I think Miami is a dangerous team this year now that Chris Bosh is healthy again. Washington is the 6. We haven't really talked about Washington a lot yet, basically because they're mostly the same team. They really didn't do anything, and they're bringing along Otto Porter, who I think is definitely in the conversation to be most improved player of the year. For the 7, I have Milwaukee. Milwaukee's my 6 and Washington's my 7. I have Milwaukee winning that by a tiebreak. So Washington my 7, Milwaukee my 6. And then in the 8th spot, I have Indiana because I think Indiana gets back to the postseason with Paul George.
Yeah, Rick, go ahead if you want to run down yours. Let me just say one thing before you do. They changed the rules, Jordan, that the division winner not only isn't guaranteed a top 4 seed, but could miss the playoffs completely. So division winners mean nothing. So if Toronto and that Atlantic division stinks, there could be 8 teams from the other 2 divisions that are all ahead of them, and there would be no one from the Atlantic to make it.
I completely forgot about that rule.
It changes everything. It really does.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, Toronto for me still winds up being the 4 record-wise, just because again they win the Atlantic by default and they beat up on the Atlantic and they still have enough wins. But that rule change, I don't understand why you would go through that rule change and keep divisions. Why not just make it all the Eastern Conference? There's no reason to have divisions at that point.
It's coming. I think that's coming, or a reorganization is coming. Ricky, if you want to run through your East.
The only thing I could think of, just going off Jordan's point, of why keep the divisions. The only thing I can think of is just money, personally. Just having that division rival matchup, the hype that you can bring off that. That's the only thing I can think of to keep those rivalries going. It's the only thing I can think of for having it. Otherwise, it's just a stupid idea, personally, to have the divisions around still. And I think you're right, Joe. I think eventually it's gonna go. But that's my spiel on that. For my Eastern Conference rankings, I have the Cavs finishing 1 finally. I do think that a lot of this depends on whether or not you think Kyrie Irving's going to come back and be the same guy he was after the kneecap injury. But I think Mo Williams can handle the point guard. I mean, he's proved that year after year in all the years he's been in the league. Mo Williams will handle it, and obviously they lose some from Kyrie, but I don't think it'll be such a disaster where the offense will lose itself. And plus, LeBron will handle the ball sometimes coming up. So we don't use too much, but I think when Kyrie comes back, I think you'll really see this team take off. I have Chicago 2. As I mentioned before, call me crazy, but Milwaukee 3. And I have a reason for that we might get into a little later. Toronto 4. I had Atlanta dropping down all the way to 5. I think they do lose something from last year. As my 6, I have Washington. And I agree with what Jordan said. Otto Porter, I think I personally have him as, I think I had him as my most improved or sixth man of the year. I think I had him most improved. Now he's not sharing minutes with Paul Pierce at the three anymore. Not that Paul Pierce was a threat, but, I think Porter, is going to be a guy that you might kind of look at as kind of a Draymond Green type guy who can play defense and he can score the basketball. Indiana 7, I mentioned Indiana before, and I had Miami 8. I originally was thinking about having the Nets at 8. And then I thought, you know what? I can't do it. They're just, this team has Brook Lopez and Jared Jack, and that's not enough to make the playoffs, even in the Eastern Conference. So I have Miami. I'm not really as high in Miami as a lot of people are. I'll probably eat those words at the end of the year when they're the 3 seed. But I have Miami as my 8th seed right now.
All right. So I go Cavs, Heat second. I really like that team, and I think that they're going to manage Wade. And even if Wade takes a night off, Goran Dragic and Chris Bosh are going to be just fine. I have the Bulls third, and a lot of that hinges on Rose. I don't even think as much of it does as people think. I think Jimmy Butler and that big front line will win a lot of regular season games. The Hawks fourth, but they are that one team that I think can really drop off, and I don't know. I think just take a step back this year. Milwaukee 5th, the Raptors 6th, Pacers 7, Wizards 8, which means I leave out the Celtics. And I think they take a step back as well. Even though they added David Lee and Amir Johnson, I think they got better. But I just think
I don't know if they took a step backward, but I actually think the whole entire East just got better, and I think that Boston just sort of stays where they are record-wise, but actually winds up taking a step forward in terms of their play.
Yep. All right, so let's move on to the West. Rick, if you want to go first on that one. Let's do this again. I think the format kind of worked well. So the West will be a little easier even. I think we can all agree, before we go over what order, Warriors, Rockets, Thunder, Clippers, Spurs, we all have in, right? Kind of as a pretty solid 5. They're going to make it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I also think the Grizzlies are a lock, but that's like my opinion. They always win 50 games. That's just how it is. So, I think Memphis is in, but I'll leave that up to you guys. So that kind of leaves 2 spots. And I'll let Ricky go first on this one. I'm considering for the last 3, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Kings, Mavs, Jazz. So if you want to, any of those teams, Rick, that you think will make it in one of those last couple spots.
Well, I do have Memphis as a playoff team. They just keep plugging along. So I can't see much of a drop off for them. And it really, you think of what might have been last year for Memphis if Mike Conley hadn't gotten hurt in the playoffs. I really think if he was healthy, they would have had more of a shot of beating Golden State. And I really believe that. He made that much of a difference for them. So hopefully he has a healthy year. And right now I have him toward the bottom of the standings in the Western Conference. But I think if you have a full year from him, they might go up a little bit more. The other 2 spots that I have, New Orleans, I right now have as my 6th seed. I really love New Orleans this year. This could be the team for me. I mean, last year, Joey and I were talking about this last night. Last year, I had Golden State Warriors finishing in the top 3. I think I had them finishing second, but I may have them finished. I think I may have them third. I wasn't sure which one. And to me, they have some similarities. They're not totally similar, but they have some similarities in that they have a guy who I thought was primed to break out, in Steph Curry. Here, he already has broken out, but I think this year, this is going to be the year where people go, whoa, this guy is an animal. We already knew that, but I think we're going to see beyond the basketball guys, say Anthony Davis is an animal. If they can play some defense besides Anthony Davis, I think the Pelicans have a shot here of surprising people. I'm not going to say they're the Warriors of last year, but I think they have an outside chance of being that. And the other team I have making the playoffs, you mentioned them, are the Utah Jazz. And the reason I say that is because the Jazz are sort of like the Magic in a way in the Eastern Conference. with the fact that they play some good defense. They were first in the league last year in offensive rebound percentage, fifth in defensive rebound percentage, first in blocks percentage. So they obviously have, with Gobert and Derek Favors, they have a front court that can play defense, and it's hard to get inside on them. I think that they need some help on the wing. They need help with the guards, especially with Dante Exum out. I think that was a big loss for them because I really think it could have been a big difference on the defensive end from the guards. Yeah, you wouldn't have to rely on Trey Burke as much. So I'm buying into the Jazz a little bit this year, but I still think they need some help with guard play.
Rick, we actually, I think, have the same 8 playoff teams.
Oh, boy.
You kind of stole my sleeper in the Utah Jazz. I was all ready to jump on them, and you literally took every single word I had right out of my mouth.
I apologize.
Rudy Gobert. Excellent work on your part. Rudy Gobert. Now, of course, that means, by the way, that we're both wrong. But Rudy Gobert.
That is true.
Absolutely. Rudy Gobert is the X factor for this team, and his development is why I think they're an 8 seed. I think Gobert is going to turn into one of the best defensive centers in the league. And on the glass, this team is just, you don't beat them on the glass. They have so much size between Favors and Gobert, and not to mention that they bring Trevor Booker off the bench, whose calling card is actually his ability to rebound. Gordon Hayward's wing scoring, Alec Burks' ability to score the ball. This is a very dangerous basketball team, and when you're talking about a Western Conference where it's basically 7 teams and then flip a coin for the 8th spot, I think this team could absolutely wind up being the 8th seed in the West, and I would even go so far as to say that they might be my favorite to be an 8th seed. Now, the team that we're leaving out is the Phoenix Suns.
Go ahead. I don't think. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Suns are the team that we're leaving out because they add Tyson Chandler and bring in more of a veteran mindset. Is it just me, or does anybody else feel like the Suns actually got worse with that move? Because they take away what I thought was the best part of their offense, which was Alex Len's ability inside. And now you're giving him less minutes. I actually think the Tyson Chandler move might make them worse.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this. I don't think it was a mistake to leave the Suns out, but I thought about them for sure. The Tyson Chandler deal was a precursor to trying to get LaMarcus Aldridge. And I guess they thought they had a really good chance. And after trading Isaiah Thomas and Goran Dragic and their protected pick from the Lakers, which is very shocking that they did all that for Brandon Knight. After doing that, they kind of like pressed the fast forward button on the rebuild. It wasn't like, let's keep plugging along and doing our thing. They kind of went more all in. So I think that this summer they were in still that mindset, like, look, this is it now. Like, we're going to go backward if we don't do this before we go forwards. So I think that's what that was. They're going to be competitive. Great coaching stands out, and Hornacek really does a great job. I like Utah as well.
I think them and the Jazz are going to compete for that 8th spot. But Joey, who do you have in that final spot? Because I think that all 3 of us have 7 of the same 8 playoff teams. So I'm curious.
Yep, I have the Jazz as well, simply because of their defense. So of course, we're all wrong. But the player to watch.
Well, that's 8 of 8. That's not good.
Is Rodney Hood. Talk about wing help. A long wing, can really shoot, is going to get some good minutes on a young team. They're going to need help at point guard, and I think they make a move in the year to get even a veteran guy at point guard, just to kind of hold it down for a year until Exum gets back. But so we have the same 8 teams. My order, and I'll start quick, is This is we have the same 8 teams, but where it gets good is what order, because it's going to be very, very tough. So I have the Warriors finishing first because they're one of the only teams that kind of stay the same. So I think that gets them off to an early start, an early lead in the conference, and that kind of keeps kind of gives them the edge in the regular season. I have Oklahoma City second, but I'm not happy about it. Kevin Durant, I don't know. I want to see him play more than 20 games in a row before OKC is a title contender. I trust Paul George to come back and kind of get back to where he was more than I trust Kevin Durant off that foot, but we'll see. So I have OKC second in the regular season. Rockets third because they're so deep. The Rockets got Ty Lawson. They're so deep, and I think they're going to be a very good regular season team. I have the Clippers fourth. Now the Spurs and Grizzlies I think might flip-flop at 5 and 6, but they're at 5 and 6. Memphis is just going to keep plugging along, doing their thing, 50-some-odd wins. That's who they are. The Spurs are going to take nights off, and if they're not going to get a top 4 seed in home court, they might just say screw it and, be 5, 6, or even 7 for the Spurs. Just getting in is going to be their focus if they can't have home court. So I'll go 5 Grizzlies, 6 Spurs because they rest a whole bunch of guys, 7 Pelicans, and 8 Utah Jazz. Let's go ahead, Ricky. It doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, Ricky first.
All right, well, you had the Clippers down at 4. I have the Clippers at number 1. And it pained me to do this because I so believed in Golden State last year. But I'm going to go with the Clippers 1. I think they pretty much have everything you can possibly ask. You want shooting? They have it. You want defense on the inside? They have it. You want, Chris Paul, he's going to get hurt eventually. I mean, he does it every year except I think for last year. He gets hurt every year. Austin Rivers, I think, has taken a lot of strides to be. I think he'd be a starting point guard on a few teams, not to mention our Nets, Joey. I think a big key for them, I think, this year is going to be Lance Stevenson. I wouldn't put, it's not really a high risk investment that they got him, but I think if he can move up and make sure Pierce isn't starting the majority of games for them, and he can be a guy that goes back to what he was with Indy, I think this makes the Clippers an even more dangerous team than what they are. So part of having them as 1 is Stevenson making that jump back to where he was with Indy a couple of years ago.
Rick, let me jump in real quick. I love Lance, and you mentioned they added shooting, and they have shooting. They also have 2 guys that are going to take irrational shots in Josh Smith and Lance Stevenson. I love Lance, but both of them are better inside. So they have shooting, and they also have guys that think they can shoot. So good or bad.
Right, but the point is you hope that Doc Rivers is able to manage that. I mean, Stevenson, with where he was in Charlotte, I mean, it just seemed like it was a free for all. With Josh Smith, when he was with Detroit, I mean, he was taking shots that I wouldn't take if I was on the court. So hopefully, you think Doc is able to say, okay, here's the role that your guys are going to play this year. If you show that you do well on that, we'll maybe give you a little bit, but it's probably not going to give you a little more wiggle room. So this is the role you guys are going to have. You guys go ahead and focus on that, and this makes this team that much better. I think Doc is going to be able to manage that, if anybody does. So I have the Warriors down at number 2. I think that 1 and 2 is probably going to be, very close. And apparently Andrew Bogut has lost a lot of weight this year and is focused on, becoming a more smaller center, and so he can stay healthy. So if he can do that, he already is a great center, but if he can do that, stay healthy for a full season with the other guys they have in the front court, with Azili and Green, I think it's obviously going to be a good team again. I have OKC as my 3rd seed, like you mentioned, Kevin Durant. Is he going to stay healthy for the whole year? I'm interested to see what Contra does with full season in Oklahoma City. I think this is a guy who obviously has shown the ability to be a scorer, to be a rebounder, to be that presence down low. Can he do it for a full season under a first-year head coach in Billy Donovan? I think he can. So I have Oklahoma City 3. The Spurs I have 4, just because they just don't seem to fade away. They're like a cold. They're like a cold that doesn't go away. They just linger, and you think that time goes on, it's gonna go away, but they don't. I have the Rockets at 5. As I mentioned, I had New Orleans at 6, Memphis at 7, and Utah Jazz 8. So that's the Western Conference we'll probably be all wrong. It'll be the Jazz 1, New Orleans 2, probably the Suns 3, and probably Minnesota 4. That's probably how things are going to go this year because we all picked the same 8 teams.
I have Houston as my top seed. And I think it's interesting that we have 3 different teams as that top dog. I think it's Houston this year. I think the X factor for Houston and my most improved player this year is Clint Capella. I don't think the postseason last year was a fluke. I think he's this good. You saw it a little bit this summer. He could just score the ball from anywhere within a 15-foot radius. And I think he's going to make Hakeem Olajuwon look incredibly intelligent in terms of the praise that Olajuwon gave him in the offseason. So Houston's my 1. I think Golden State remains one of those top teams, and they're the 2. I don't think we really need to say anything about Golden State, but isn't it interesting? Can you remember an NBA champion that is getting written off as quickly as Golden State is? Nobody is talking about this team. Meanwhile, they really didn't lose anything. What did they lose? David Lee? That's basically it. They keep the same team. And nobody is talking about them. I think that's great for Steve Kerr and company, for this team, which is relatively young, to not actually have championship expectations coming off a year that you won the championship. I think that's a recipe for success in Golden State. Number 3 for me is Los Angeles. I think they're going to buy hard for one of the top 3 seeds because I think they're going to need it. This team is going to be a really good team at home, and I actually think that their Achilles heel is going to be their inconsistency on the road. Just a gut feeling for me. I'm not a fan of Lance Stevenson. I think Lance Stevenson probably winds up being useless, but I think the guy that's the X factor for them is Josh Smith off the bench. I think Smith proved that he can be very valuable in that role in the postseason last year, and I think he'll be a great addition for Doc Rivers. 4 for me is the Spurs. I think the Spurs are actually quietly the best team in the NBA. When you talk about a Greg Popovich team that has almost everybody the same, and then they go along and add LaMarcus Aldridge and David West, this team is going to be incredible in the postseason. I think they're going to be incredibly tough out if you can get them out. And that's a little precursor, by the way, if you were wondering what I had coming out of the West. 5 for me is OKC. OKC, I think, is going to be very smart this year. I think Billy Donovan is going to pick up on the NBA trend of let's make sure we're healthy in April. Yep. The seed doesn't necessarily matter, especially in the West, where everybody is really good. Let's just make sure we're healthy and we're ready to go and we can beat anybody. And I think they might take the pedal off the metal down the stretch of the season to make sure that they are healthy. Memphis is 6 because, like you both said, they're Memphis. They just, wake up, win 50 games, probably get bounced in the first and second round, go back to sleep. New Orleans is 7. New Orleans is key if they want to go forward in this season. Excuse me. New Orleans' key is Drew Holiday. This team is going to go as Drew Holiday goes. If Drew Holiday can be one of the better point guards in this league, and he can give them a scoring punch along with being the lead guard, I think this is a dangerous team in the postseason. If Drew Holiday is inconsistent and Drew Holiday has nights where he takes bad shots and has nights where he looks like he has mental lapses, and that's really what I've seen from Holiday, especially in better teams, is I think he sort of gets taken away. If he can be consistent every night, this team could be very dangerous. And like we have mentioned, at the 8th spot, I have Utah.
All that was great. I want to now move quickly. We have to move quickly through all of these. And of course, when I say move quickly, I know we're not going to actually move quickly. That's fine. All right. So we're going to do.
You're saying we talk a lot?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I had you guys on. I think. I don't know. Western Conference Finals and Eastern Conference Finals prediction. and then also just finish it out with the finals and who you have winning, and we'll try to do this kind of quick. Okay, I'm going first. So it doesn't matter what order you predicted them in. I looked at it as a completely separate thing because obviously the matchups are going to be huge, and that goes without saying, and injuries and all that stuff. But I have the Spurs and the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, and I think the West is like the most fun, trying to figure out who is going to come out of there. And I have the Cavs and the Heat in the East. I then selected the Spurs over the Warriors and the Cavs over the Heat for a Spurs-Cavs finals rematch from 2007, and you can also call it kind of a rematch from the Heat and Spurs because of LeBron. It's going to be great. And I can't see the Spurs losing to the Cavs, so I have the Spurs beating the Cavs as my champion right now.
I'll go next because
sure. Yep.
Rick, I'll go next because for my predictions, you can just go see Joe's. I have the Spurs playing the Warriors based on matchups, and I have San Antonio winning. Like I said, I think San Antonio is the best team in the NBA. I think they're going to be really smart with minutes down the stretch. I think LaMarcus Aldridge is going to look like an absolute beast in Popovich's offense. I have the Cavs beating the Heat. Cleveland, for me, if foreshadowing into this NBA Finals matchup, and oh, by the way, this would be LeBron's fourth time facing Greg Popovich and the Spurs in the NBA championship, which is interesting in and of itself. Cleveland, for me, and we say it with every team that he's on, but I'm going to say it again, if J.R. Smith is actually right, there is no doubt about it that this Cleveland Cavaliers team can beat anybody on any night, no matter what the circumstance is. If J.R. Smith is wrong, you just don't know. And the reason why J.R. Smith is even so much more important this year is because they really don't have three-point shooting outside of J.R. Smith and Mo Williams off the bench when Kyrie comes back and is healthy. That's really all they've got that is consistently reliable from the arc off the bench. So he is, as far as teams go and as far as team value goes, he might be as important to this Cavs team as anybody else is in the NBA. But I have the Spurs beating the Cavs in 6.
Well, this is where the person comes in who differs totally.
And is correct.
You know what? I highly doubt it. I have, for whatever reason, I decided I wanted to shake things up. So before I even get to the matchups of the finals, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, because I had the 4-6 matchup, I have New Orleans beating San Antonio in the first round.
Wow.
I think you're going to go into that series, even if it doesn't line up 4-6, even if it's like, Spurs are 2 and New Orleans is 7. New Orleans are going to go into that series, and even though they got pretty beat up by Golden State, they still, I thought, played pretty well for a lot of first-time playoff people. So I'm going to say New Orleans goes into this series totally with no pressure on them whatsoever, and I think they played a series of a lifetime. They'll get knocked out in the next round. But I think they'll just to screw with people, will beat San Antonio in the first round. I am totally wrong, but I'm just going to go out there. My conference finals matchups, I have Cavs Bulls out in the East. In the West, I have Clippers and Thunder in the West. In my finals matchup, I have Clippers Bulls with the Clippers winning in 5.
Wow. All right, I don't even want to touch that, to be honest.
Let's go to superlatives. That was a good end. Let's go to superlatives.
Yep, I'm going to do that really quick. The only thing that I do want to mention we didn't mention how big of an acquisition Matt Barnes is for the Grizzlies. Talk about a perfect fit and a guy who can hit some corner threes because that's what they need. He's not their answer from the behind the arc, but I think Matt Barnes, you're gonna really see him have an impact in May for the Grizzlies. And the Spurs, the one thing against them is, not enough minutes to go around. LaMarcus is going to be unhappy not getting touches. I think their depth is going to help them so much when they take nights off. And by nights off, resting Parker, resting Ginobili this night, resting Duncan. When they rest one of those guys, someone else just fills in and gets the minutes that they want anyway. So they can play their full team at times and get used to that. And then when someone wants to, when they want to give somebody a rest, David West will step in and start, and now he's getting the minutes that he, wanted.
They're too good.
So I think it's gonna work, and I think the San Antonio way is going to work, and I think Popovich is a huge part of that. All right, let's go quickly. We're an hour in, so 10 more minutes, because I know we're not going to do this quick. Let's name the superlatives quick, right? We'll kind of get in order. So let's do, I'll say the superlative in mine, and then we'll go Ricky and then Jordan. And then these are like the awards, not the superlatives. Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year. We'll fly through these. And then the superlatives are more fun. We can kind of talk about them a little more, and we'll get out on that, all right? So me, Ricky, and then Jordan. Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go Emmanuel Mudiay.
I'm going Julius Randle.
Stole the words right out of my mouth, Julius Randle.
Wow. Okay. Coach of the Year. First, go ahead. We're going to go on the Lakers real quick. We can all say something. I just want to know if they're playing with 3 basketballs or 2, or how the Lakers are going to do it with Nick Young, Lou Williams, and Kobe.
What they're going to do is they're going to try to convince Kobe to get the Stephon Marbury treatment at some point, where they just say, hey, look, sit out the season so we can develop our young guys. Take your $22 million and just go somewhere else.
And then when Kobe wants to play, then what are they going to do?
Well, they might have to give him an extra basketball and another court for him to play on.
I'm pretty sure to say, hey, Kobe, go away. But to go away, we're going to make you our GM.
Yeah, there you go.
Fair. Coach of the Year. Now, this is good. I'm going to go. So Billy Donovan is probably going to win it. First-year coach, OKC, if they're good, how much of it is Billy Donovan, who knows? But I think Alvin Gentry and Scott Skiles are in the running. Sneaky picks.
I think I'm going to go with Jason Kidd.
Wow.
I think
okay.
I like what Milwaukee's going to do this year.
I'm going to take Fred Hoiberg, another rookie coach, because I think the Bulls wind up getting the 1, and I think that speaks volumes.
Yep. Okay, this is a good one. First coach fired, which is interesting. So the Orlando coach was always a good pick last year, Jacques Vaughn. They were going to make a switch. If Toronto struggles, like I think, Dwayne Casey might be in trouble. And also, when Charlotte doesn't have or make the playoffs like they probably should at this point in the rebuild, Steve Clifford might be in trouble as well.
To me, I think this is an easy one. I'm going with George Karl, just because it's the Kings.
Yeah.
That's definitely a fair pick. I'm going with Steve Clifford, and I don't even think Steve Clifford makes it to January, by the way.
Wow. Most improved player, very hard. I'm going to take Giannis. Antetokounmpo. I think the Bucks are more well-known. He gets more recognition, and he obviously also improves a lot. I think he gets most improved.
I think I'm going to go with Otto Porter in Washington. I like him getting more minutes with Pierce out, so I'm going with Otto.
And I'm going to go with Clint Capella in Houston. I think he'll wind up being the starting 4 for the Rockets, and I think his offensive game is going to be on full display for that team.
Wow. Defensive Player of the Year. I'm going to take Kawhi Leonard, because he's going to be one of those guys that won't get many days off, so he'll play a lot. And if he stays healthy, I think he's a lock to get it.
I'm staying on the New Orleans bandwagon, and I'm riding Anthony Davis for the Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, Joey, I know Kawhi Leonard. I believe Kawhi Leonard won last year, and I don't think a timer has happened in quite some time. But you picked it wrong the minute you didn't pick Anthony Davis, so I'm sorry about that.
I know. There's something to be said. I know Anthony Davis is probably going to win it just because it won't be the same person twice in a row. Excuse me, but it's so fun watching people who are very good at basketball not be able to dribble around Kawhi Leonard. It's like a superpower. It's crazy. Sixth Man of the Year. I'm going to take Patrick Beverley. It was hard. This one was hard. but I'm going to take Patrick Beverley in a huge role off the bench for the Rockets.
I'm going to go to Chicago for mine, Nikola Mirotic. They got a lot of old guys in that front court, and I think Mirotic as a stretch four is going to be a big key for them.
Nikola Mirotic actually just got named a starter by Hoiberg.
Well, then he's not going to win
Really?
at the end of the year.
He's projected in that starting lineup.
I'm already wrong.
I'm going to take someone who I'm going to just stick on the same team, but I'm going to take someone who I guess technically is going to be considered a sixth man because according to Hoiberg, Joakim Noah is coming off the bench this year.
Wow.
And if that's the case, then that is a gimme pick for sixth man of the year.
MVP, I'm going to take, this stinks. I think Paul George is as good a pick as any because in a weak East, if he gets that team 6, 5, 4 seed, I think that's and he's going to be very flashy. I'll take Anthony Davis, the boring pick. Go ahead.
That's good. Good job being right.
You know what? I'm pretty sure we can all say Anthony Davis here.
Yep. Let's move on.
And I'm going to move on right after this. The reason it's kind of an easy choice for Anthony Davis, like Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook pull away from each other. Harden now has Lawson kind of taking away some of his stats. Curry, is he really going to win it again? If his numbers come down a little, then, he had not as good of a year. The Clippers kind of all share, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, they all take away again from each other. The Spurs are going to rest guys. LeBron's going to have his 2 weeks off, and he can't do it the whole year. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of narrows down to
it's not only that. He just might be the best player in the NBA besides LeBron
Totally
James.
true.
He really might just be that other guy.
Yep.
You got no Oregon for me.
Yeah. Let's go to some of the more fun superlatives for the last couple. Oh, no, we got to do this. Zocco's the superlative question. Woo! That's the superlative with a Z. All right. This is also a quick one. How many games will Kobe Bryant and Derrick Rose play this year? I'm going to just do it combined, and I will say combined less than 60.
I'm going to say 85 combined.
I'm going to say I'll be the outlier. I'm going to say 97 combined. Most of that from Rose.
Yeah. All right. I don't even have an answer for this one, so I'm not even going to try. And if you guys don't, it's fine. It's a tough one. Player most likely to be suspended because of social media.
DeMarcus Cousins.
Okay.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's tough. It's hard. Player most likely to be traded this season. I'll give you some of the people I thought of, and then you guys can actually pick one if you want. Any Denver Nugget. They're all on the block. Marquise Morris, because he's already been complaining. Boogie, if that goes sour. And I think Eric Gordon is an interesting player on an expiring deal to be moved. I think Eric Gordon is a guy to watch to make, maybe that'll be how New Orleans makes their jump, from last year to this year to get better.
I got two guys in mind. Yep. Nikola Pekovic with Minnesota. I think he's a guy that obviously he can play defense. A team needs a center. Even though he's got a couple of years left on his deal, I think he's got 30-something million left. I think maybe a team with cap space who needs a center won't be willing to take him on to be their starting center for a playoff stretch. Another guy, Joe Johnson. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He could still get a bucket for you when you need it. And I think he's a good guy to have off the bench for just scoring spurts. So I'm going with those two.
We mentioned earlier that Utah is a team that's going to look for a lead guard at the deadline and somebody that can control their offense and basically relegate Trey Burke to his more appropriate role of coming off the bench. I think the answer is Jarrett Jack. I think Jarrett Jack has proven that on the right team, he can be incredibly successful in terms of running an offense. I think if he splits time, that's his best role. And I think Brooklyn's going to be really, really terrible. So I think Jarrett Jack fits the bill.
For sure. And just about the money thing, which I can't believe it took us an hour to say this, the money's not going to matter, especially if it's an expiring contract. But with Pekovic,
absolutely not.
Pekovic's contract is going to look like peanuts when the cap jumps next year. So Pekovic, it won't be a problem taking on the rest of his contract, and it won't be as bad as it is now. Player most likely to celebrate before a shot goes in, and the shot has to miss because that is what makes it like a blooper. Swaggy P is out. He's already done it. And I think this also rules out Stephen Curry.
That's the pick.
Because I don't think he'll celebrate and miss. I don't think Stephen Curry will. So I don't even have any guesses on this.
I'm going to say J.R. Smith.
I'll still take DeMarcus Cousins.
Okay. I think we kind of did. I'm going to skip the team most likely to underachieve. We kind of talked about that with the playoff thing. All right. I'm going to swear. Swear alert. Coach most likely to give us our next catchphrase, a la build a fucking wall, Stan Van Gundy in Detroit. I looked at some coaches. Rick Carlisle has very good sound. I think Alvin Gentry is going to be sneaky fun. And Randy Whitman, it may not be a sound, but it may be an action with a clipboard or something the wrong way again. So I'll take Carlisle.
I'll go with Billy Donovan.
That's not a bad pick because Billy Donovan's actually a very fiery guy, and there's a lot of egos there. I'm taking Carlisle too. Quickly on that, the team most likely to disappoint. That's the Dallas Mavericks for me. Because for some reason, people think that this could be a playoff team. I don't know how. This team is dreadful, and I think Carlisle is absolutely the pick to just completely blow up on this team.
Agreed. We did those two. I think, speaking of coaches, I think this last one's a good one. Coach most likely to make the biggest impact on their new team. So I'll give you some of the options, and you guys can pick. As we mentioned, Hoiberg in Chicago. So this kind of is Coach of the Year, but I think it could be different. To have the biggest impact on the team. Hoiberg, Alvin Gentry in New Orleans, Billy Donovan in Oklahoma City, Scott Skiles in Orlando. I think you can also kind of throw George Karl in. Coach to have the biggest impact on their new team.
You know what? Oh, that's tough. I'm going to go with Hoiberg. I think he's already changed the look of the team just by what Jordan said, just having Noah start the year on the bench. Because before they never with Thibodeau, they never would have considered with his defensive abilities having Noah come off the bench. So I think that in itself is a huge move for them. So I'm going Hoiberg.
Obviously, I'm taking Hoiberg because I picked him to win Coach of the Year. I think that the Bulls are going to look to play offense out of the gate and then play defense at the end of games. And I think that's a recipe to win in the NBA based on the way the game is called. But for a sleeper pick in this category, Scott Skiles is money in the bank in Orlando if you're looking for a sleeper pick, because his philosophy of sprint and run and play tough and physical is the makeup of this Orlando Magic team.
Yeah, what a great fit for him in Orlando. All right, I think that's going to do it. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Zoc Modern Life. You can follow me on Twitter at Joseph Zocco. I did my research. I have your guys' Twitter handle. Jordan Katz is at Jordan Katz 11, and Ricky Funaro is at Rick_Funaro. Guys, thank you very much. This went pretty well for a three-person podcast, I think.
Yeah, it was a great
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for listening.